Shut up and sit down.
This is Holistic Vigilantes, hosted by Dr. Kimberly Bear and Dr. Jennifer Tippegraph. These two badass dentists are breaking the mold to provide modern dentistry that doesn't compromise overall health. Determined to spread the word, the Vigilantes are kicking down the door as they bring you honest answers to hard questions. Buckle up for a wild ride down the Meridian Highway as they explore the connection between oral health and whole body health, saving the world one smile at a time. And now, the Holistic Vigilantes.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jennifer Tippegraph.
And I'm Kimberly Bear.
And we are
the Holistic Vigilantes.
Today we have Rabbi Kahn, the director for Liberty Cannabis, one of the nation's largest multi-state cannabis operations. He's responsible for creating and implementing a holistic platform focused on social equality for this beautiful field of medical cannabis and diversity. Began as a community outreach, I believe, with your parents, another Rabbi Kahn.
True.
Yeah, your dad. Family opened Tacoma Wellness Center, which I've been to. It's great. It's awesome. You have remember that second floor where you guys do a lot of education there. Yep. And meetings before all of COVID. It was DC's first family-owned and run medical dispensary. And the dispensary has been nationally recognized for their patient-focused treatment. And I really do appreciate you take care of a lot of our patients, and we have this great relationship. And with Liberty, what I like is you have that private consult room too. So if people are just want some privacy, or they're bringing in their child or something, there's a little bit of, just a little room over there that you can just have.
It's very professional.
Yeah, it's just really nice. And
should I not chime in yet?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I'm supposed to keep my.
Yeah, and everyone that wears Liberty, everyone's so sweet,
yeah,
they're educated
people.
and nice, and I just feel like our patients are really taken care of, and you guys really listen to them and help them with their needs. So thank you for being here. We're super excited to talk to you.
Thanks for the shout out to our staff at Liberty and at Tacoma.
Yeah.
We really hire for empathy. You can't train for empathy.
Yeah.
You can train the rest.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's great.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. The medicine, I tell the staff, medicine starts with you, with how you greet folks when they come in. Aww. And, the cannabis is
people
a bonus.
feel self-conscious and
yeah.
this is the first time, and
they're maybe a little scared, a little nervous, embarrassed, all the above. It's
Well, you mentioned my dad, who has been in this business for a while now. When I actually introduced him to the world of professional cannabis, because in college I went to the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands for a semester. And so, of course, he had to come visit me. Mm-hmm. And I took him to a coffee shop. And the first coffee shop I took him to, he refused to go in. He thought it would be better if he stayed outside while I went in and purchased, so that someone was there to bail us out. He's like, just in case you get in trouble. Yeah. I'm like, no, Dad, it's really okay. You can go in, you can buy pot, mm-hmm. It's okay. And once he saw, and then there was no turning back.
Right.
He was pretty.
Yeah.
Pretty excited.
I remember going into my first dispensary, and I was like, this is like a jewelry store, but instead of the jewelry in the display cases, it's all weed.
Yeah,
it's really
pretty
cool.
exciting.
Yeah,
it really.
Yeah, it was very.
We did it that way purposely to really to make people feel comfortable, so that they, it's been so maligned for so many years, and cannabis has been so stigmatized. If you use it, you're a stoner. I mean, being compared to a stone is not usually inspiring. Analogy.
Yeah.
It to be wasted. It's just not. It's not. So we really are trying to. It's at least with Liberty, especially, we're trying to liberate the cannabis experience and elevate the cannabis experience, and that was part of it. Was really investing in the space. My parents' place, Tacoma Wellness, is more mom and pop. But that too is really about elevating and just changing the paradigm of what people feel like when they walk into a dispensary. It's it's cool.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So let's dive right into.
Yeah.
So how have you seen medical cannabis help people?
how have I seen medical cannabis help
I
people?
know it's kind of broad.
In so many ways.
What would be the most surprising way?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a story. So being a rabbi, people come to me with guilt. Jewish guilt is a thing.
It's not just a Jewish
it's
thing.
not just Jewish. No, I know Catholics have a lot of guilt. I don't think anyone has a monopoly on guilt, but Jews have guilt. And one of our patients, when I was first running our store in Rockville, came up to me. He'd been at the shop for at least 6 months, and he pulled me aside. He asked if he could sit down in one of those private one-on-one rooms, and we sat down. And he said, "Rabbi," he's like, "I have something to confess." I'm like, "Okay, I'm not a priest, but I can hear your confession." So he said, "My cancer treatments, my chemotherapy, ended last month, but I'm still here." and I laughed, and I was like, "Well, why are you still here?" And he said, "Honestly," and I'm like, "Honestly," and he said, "Well, before I tried cannabis, I was just constantly a ball of stress." He said, "I'd come home from work, and I would lock myself in my office." And, my stomach was in knots. I never felt like eating. My wife and I argued. I barely saw my kids. I slept terribly. And I'd wake up every morning and do the same thing again the next day. And he said, since starting this cannabis treatment for my chemotherapy, I take a couple drops of cannabis tincture at the end of my workday. And by the time I see my family and my kids, I'm starting to feel hungry. I sit down and eat with my kids and my wife every night. We talk, we laugh, we sometimes play board games. And I have an appetite, and I sleep like a baby. And sometimes my wife and I even are intimate.
Yeah.
And then I wake up the next morning and I do the same thing again.
That's great.
And that was, I think that's one of the ways that was kind of what woke me up to the fact that cannabis, medicinal cannabis and recreational cannabis, it wasn't exactly always a fine line between what we call medicine and what we call recreation. This was kind of a wellness.
Right.
This was about how could you live a better life?
Right.
How could I just enjoy my days more?
Well, so, we've obviously seen great applications in terms of dentistry. Our patients will use it for pain control after, a procedure.
That's
they'll use it
the number
for
one.
dental anxiety. They'll use it for clenching and grinding, for sleep. And that's what I like is they'll come to you guys and say, because there's obviously different ways to ingest medical cannabis. You can smoke it, drink it, eat it, whatever you want to do. And, what I like is they'll come and say, okay, I need it to help me with, I'm having an upcoming dental appointment and I would just like little help with the anxiety portion, or I'm having a tooth extracted. And you'll say, okay, this strain is good for blah, blah, blah. This strain, a lot of the education comes from you guys. But what's been really cool is to hear some of their experiences where they'll say, okay, I used to take, say this pharmaceutical drug prescription for whatever it may have been. And now I don't need to take that, and I think the stigma associated with the medical cannabis is like, oh, well, it's a drug, it's a drug, it's a drug. It's like, okay, well, what do you think you're taking every day when you open that prescription bottle? That's a drug. But, what we like, being that we're holistic dentists, it's more of a natural approach, and it can help with so many things, not just the pain control or the anxiety. It's like you were saying in your story, anxiety, appetite, all these things that,
Pain is
and people,
number one,
and just because you do it, it doesn't mean you're going to be high, you can't function. There's a way, and now with all the research and technology that's come with it, you can do it and be fully functional, which is amazing. Yeah, if you choose to, you know, you can do it. Like one of my closest friends, every morning used to start off with the anxiety drug or antidepressant, and instead does like the drops in the water, 1-2 drops, fully functional, goes about the day, doesn't have to take any prescription drugs.
It's microdosing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what I think that's one of the few, it's part of the future of cannabis is microdosing.
Amazing. Yeah.
Which is defined as
many
2
things.
point, it's true, absolutely. There's I know people are microdosing psilocybin.
Yeah.
But 2.5 milligrams of cannabis or less is considered a microdose. And for a lot of folks, it doesn't come with a psychoactive component. It's really, it really can help a lot with chronic pain. So pain, cannabis it's not a narcotic. It's not numbing the pain. It doesn't make it disappear, but it can help it kind of fade into the back of your consciousness. It's not front and center, especially at a low dose. That's one of the things people can really mess up, is that they can, they'll try to treat their pain with cannabis, and they'll smoke or they'll consume too much, and they can become more sensitized to pain.
For sure.
Typically, beginners who take more than 7.5 milligrams of THC will have a negative experience if they're trying to treat their pain with cannabis. It's the same reason that cannabis is so wonderful for, making food taste better, or sex feel better, or music sound better. It's your senses are heightened, and that can be great when you're at a concert or with your partner, but not so good if you're trying to treat pain.
Sure.
So really low dose, microdose is absolutely the future, especially when it's combined with other cannabinoids. Cannabis is I say it's like a fruit salad of different chemicals, and some of them have medicinal value. THC is the one we mostly know of that gets the most press. CBD has been getting a lot of press too, but there's the whole alphabet soup of CDC, CBG, these different cannabinoids that have different effects, and we've really been able to dial it in. That's the beauty of regulated legal cannabis, is that we can dial it in. We have 30 scientists that work for Holistic Industries. Holistic is the company that owns Liberty. It's our retail stores. But 30 scientists that work for us, and they're cool. Innovating different ways where, how we can increase the onset time of edibles. Because right now when you take an edible, it can take 45 minutes to an hour and a half to feel the effect.
Sure.
But how can we bring that down to 10 minutes? And sometimes an edible can also last a long time, but not everybody wants to feel the effect of an edible for 6 or 8 hours.
Sure.
So
That can be
how
scary.
can we lower that if people? So it's really dialed in, and the future is so bright. I mean, even something like the munchies, which can, on a medical level, can have incredible value.
Yes.
And I remember a grandma who came in. I remember sitting in one of those one-on-one privacy rooms with this grandmother who was horrified that she was in this dispensary, but she had heard there was a rabbi. She's going to go talk to the rabbi. So she comes in, she sits down, she says, "Rabbi, I hear pot gives you the munchies." And I'm like, it can, for some folks, yeah, absolutely. It can make it can stimulate the appetite. And she's like, "Well, my grandson is currently at Children's Hospital in DC, and he has cancer, but what's killing him is he's wasting away. And if he doesn't eat something, he's going to die." And she was very serious, and it turned out that gummies did the trick. Yeah, and he was eating amazing. McDonald's, that evening, which was pretty amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I do a lot of surgery, and we do a lot of dental work can be pretty painful, and so I've been in the dental field for almost 25 years. And when I got out of school in the 90s, you would write a script for Vicodin or Percocet and on a Friday, no matter what, just so you didn't get that phone call, sort of like what the training was. And then, maybe, 10, 12 years ago, I started to, you see the problems, the addiction, you see it in your family, you see it everywhere, everywhere. It's prolific. It's an epidemic. And then the future, you could see the future was coming, that we were not going to be able to use these drugs, which was kind of terrifying, because the pain, even when they classify a drug, the one procedure they use to classify how strong a drug is a third molar extraction. So what they do is, whether it's a new combination of hydrocodone and something or another, they'll go to these schools or these centers, and they will take wisdom teeth patients and have them take the drugs to figure out how long they act, how strong they are, and that's like the biggest way that they determine how strong a narcotic is. So I knew I was going to have to, and I had patients who I knew had issues, and I wasn't going to be able to prescribe these drugs. And even though I knew ibuprofen works probably even better, there's a psychological component and a fear component. And so when Jennifer was like, "We need to get certified to do this," it was like right before that was coming to Maryland. I was very intrigued, and I always thought it should happen, because it was silly that it wasn't. But at the same time, coming from a family where we have a lot of addicts in our family, sort of saw it as we're just really replacing one drug for another drug. And I get that, and sometimes it's the lesser evil or whatever I can get my patient, but it blew my mind when we did the training that we did. Like I had to actually sit down and read the research. I had no idea. And I tell my patients, it was so surprising to me. Like I assumed all the good things it could do, like if you had, but it really is shocking. And until someone really reads it all and knows that, I cannot imagine anybody coming out of that with any other idea except for, yeah, we should do this.
I mean, just how efficacious.
Yes.
Yeah.
With so many
really
things.
It's true.
And it sounds crazy, like a
No,
cure-all.
it can sound like snake oil.
It does
because
sound like
of the
snake
vast
oil. It
number
does
of-
sound like snake oil. But the
Yeah.
non-addictive, even just, anything can be psychologically addictive. God knows food is probably what's killing all of us. So,
Sugar.
but sugar, yeah. But the idea that it's a non-physically addictive drug that my patients can use, and I started educating our patients and recommending them getting a card before certain procedures potentially to help them afterwards was like great.
Yeah, I love that we do the recommendations.
Oh, you said so many things there that are powerful. The idea of prescribing an opiate for the treatment of pain is like, it's like Russian roulette, right? Because that out of every 10 people you prescribe that to, a few of those folks are going to try that and it's going to wake them up in a way that they don't need to be woken up, and it's going to feel a level of peace and comfort that they maybe haven't felt in a while.
For sure.
And that is, we all deal with a lot of stress, and we all carry our own traumas and our own dramas, and it can be really, that sense of peace that opiates bring in that initial phase can be quite compelling.
Sure.
But the end result is always the same, which is that it's got a terrible ending to every one of those stories.
And doesn't last forever. You're just
No, it
chasing it.
doesn't.
You're just chasing it.
Yeah.
And the constippation part, I don't get that.
It's
It's a terrible. I could never be a drug user because
No.
constipation
I grew up with
is
my
terrible.
grandfather who had MS, was diagnosed in his early 30s, and by the time he was my age, 42, he was totally bedbound. He was a vibrant veteran, a realtor. He flew from Miami to the Bahamas on a daily basis. He was quite a guy, and then just totally floored by this MS. And he became so desperate for relief from pain and from this different spasticity issues that he at one point was injecting snake venom. That was the idea, that you could inject snake venom. It did not work, but he also became incredibly addicted to opiates, injecting morphine. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Luckily, by the time I knew him, he was off of that stuff, but he really struggled, and that was kind of my family's awakening to cannabis, is that he needed it. It was, and he was not a cannabis guy. He was very much anti-hippies. He was not a fan of any long-haired boys my mom brought home, and he identified cannabis with the counterculture movement. But when it comes to your own pain and your own suffering, and something worked, one of his aides said, you should try this. And it immediately stopped his shaking. His hands would shake violently. And he would, I remember him screaming out in pain. My grandmother's name, Libby, like, I need my medicine. It was always the medicine. And cannabis just radically transformed his life.
Yeah. So speaking of depression, anxiety, pain, all that stuff ties in with COVID. What have you seen with medical cannabis in COVID? Well,
there's a lot of different angles to it, but
Right.
one really important angle is that cannabis has been deemed an essential service, an essential business. Dispensaries. I mean, in our wildest minds, who could have imagined that a pandemic would befall this country and the government would have to protect essential businesses and everything else would close? But you could go to the hospital, you could see a doctor, and you could get your pot. It was just like, it was so. I think that really has done a lot for the stigma around cannabis and really elevated it. When push comes to shove, this is something that is critical to the well-being of so many Americans, so many people around the world.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of us, cannabis has been an essential part of our well-being through COVID. I don't know any of the research around, how well cannabis helps with treating COVID symptoms or how much it prevents anything. I don't know any of that. But I can tell you that it has made being locked up inside your house with your children and your partner, it's made it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And that's a blessing in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of research, I mean, that would be great. COVID and cannabis research,
It's going on. We're actually, Holistic is sponsoring it. We're working with the Cannabis Center of Excellence, I think, out of Massachusetts, and largely just looking at different how people's consumption habits have changed.
Sure.
And people have been consuming more cannabis largely, but
And more alcohol.
and more drugs in general.
Yeah. But that leads us to the next thing about the research.
So but before we even get into
Sorry.
So what kind of like resistance in the community have you seen, and what's going on with the Controlled Substance Act?
Yeah. Well, so I'm actually, I probably should have researched the Controlled Substance Act. I'm not so up to date. The resistance is changing, but in communities, we go into a lot of communities that already have cannabis. So those communities, they already know they're going to be okay. But in some of these new communities where they've never had a dispensary or never had a cannabis business set up shop, it can feel like the sky's going to fall, that our kids are going to all be hooked on pot before they graduate.
Crack on the corner.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the sky does not fall. And we're able to, that's the good news, is that nothing bad happens. In fact, often crime goes down because whenever you have a dispensary, you often have security outside the dispensary. And if you want to keep cannabis away from teens, then you need to have, a retired cop at the checking IDs when you come into your shop. I mean, that's how you regulate it. Mm-hmm. That's how you keep it out of the hands of teenagers. So that's largely.
What about like, as for instance, like people's concerns with driving under the influence?
So that's one of the challenges that we're facing with cannabis. Right now, there's not a great way to test for somebody's current state of inebriation, right? So if you could do there's tests that cops do when they pull you over. You have to walk in a straight line. I don't think I could do those tests anyway, just to my test, put my foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. But it's a challenge because if you're pulled over, let's say you consumed cannabis 2 days ago, and you're pulled over tomorrow morning, you could still have a blood test showing that you're positive for cannabis when in fact you're not feeling any of the effects. So that's a real challenge, and urine is 30 days, up to 30 days or more.
Are they doing research on eyes? Like, aren't they?
There is some interesting stuff in Colorado. I'm not.
I think the eye thing is going to be the go-to. They're actually designing cars because the number one killer with driving under the influence is actually driving tired.
Yeah.
So they're going to have. So when you go in, your car windshield will. If you're
evaluate how tired you are.
If you're starting,
start again.
If you're starting, yeah. But I mean, it really would be very interesting. I have a friend who works in the Department of Transportation and does that kind of research. And she was telling me about it. And I was like, that is so fascinating. They have the ability to do that. It's just a matter of getting it everywhere is difficult.
I hope it happens quickly. I think it is an issue. Nobody should drive under the influence of
anything,
of any drug.
Yes.
Especially, when people have been using for a long time, consumers of cannabis who've been consuming cannabis for years, they have a sense of when they're able to. But especially if you're new to cannabis, you need to give a large window, 6 to 8 hours, really, before you, maybe even the next day. I would. Err on the side of caution always.
That's good advice.
Yeah, with driving services like Ubers and Lyfts, I mean, it's so easy. It's a no-brainer. Research-wise.
Well, one more thing about resistance. I think that where I do see a challenge is in some degree in the Black community. I'm a clergy member, and I've done work organizing other clergy to really around progressive drug laws. Around the importance of access to cannabis as a as an issue of social justice, of something that everybody should have access to. Anti-mandatory minimums and treatment over incarceration, all those types of things. But the Black community has really been damaged by the war on drugs, over-policed. Black folks are 4 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis use than white folks, and despite equal use patterns. So in those communities, it's a big ask to trust us that bringing cannabis into your community is not going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And largely, thankfully, the results are positive. It doesn't make it worse, but there certainly is resistance and hesitation among the clergy, especially.
Lack of
and for
trust.
good reason. I mean, they've seen their grandkids, they've seen their kids
themselves.
jailed,
It's
themselves
crazy,
be jailed, and then when you end up with a drug charge on your record, it is a nightmare for everything from getting an apartment to getting a scholarship and a job. I mean, there's places in the country where we're not able to hire people who have a drug record. Nonviolent cannabis, small misdemeanor can set you back in life, and it's just devastating. So for those communities, there is certainly well-founded concerns, but we're educating, and we are we're doing our best to really to what we call social equity, which is repairing, using some of the resources generated by the legal regulated market of cannabis market to address some of the damage wrought by the war on drugs.
Try to change the laws and get the records
state
cleaned.
level what's it called, expungement is really critical. In any state that legalizes cannabis, expunge the records of people who've been prosecuted for
what about
a plant.
the people that are still in jail?
I mean, that's so
crazy.
if you ask me about things that keep me up at night, that's one of them. I mean, it's that what we do on a daily basis, there are people sitting in jail for still, and that is heartbreaking, and it's still going to jail for in certain places.
I have a good friend that's a public defender in Boston, and her stories are just gut-wrenching. Like that we're putting is just crazy.
For a plant.
I know.
For a plant.
And they're going away longer than the violent criminals.
I mean, and changing in a lot of places, but it's not everywhere, and a lot of work still has to be done. So, all right, sorry, you had,
Yeah.
So going into research, as far as what I know, you guys are involved in some research.
Yeah, holistic is in. So there's 2 different you guys. My family's got the mom and pop shop in DC. That's Tacoma Wellness Center, and then there's Holistic Industries, which is Liberty Cannabis. Holistic is the largest privately held cannabis company in the country, multi-state operator, vertically organized, which means we have a cultivation license, we have processing licenses, and we dispense. So Holistic is involved with research. We are doing, we're currently partnered with the University of California, Irvine. We're actually seeking participants in a trial right now. So if you happen to live near the University of California, Irvine, probably check out their website and look up. It's a drug trial for something that we call Cannaceutica, which is a product that we're developing, designed specifically to meet the needs of healthcare professionals who are reticent about telling people to smoke a joint. When you tell someone, it's really hard to prescribe a joint. I mean, well, what size joint? And how big of a puff are you supposed to take? And, your puff, how long do you hold it in for? And what type of cannabis? And it can be it's just not the way medicine typically works.
The doctors, the traditional doctors like to write the scripts.
And not only all those challenges that I just mentioned, but it impacts people differently.
Right.
There's just so many components to it. So we are trying to come up with a dosing protocol and a titration protocol that really works. And we're creating a product that is consistent and uniform across different markets, so that when you go, to a dispensary and purchase Cannaceutica in Northern California, and then you go and purchase it in Western Mass, it's going to be the exact same product. And we that's what we believe is part of the future of cannabis.
Are there any pharmaceutical companies involved with this?
I know that GW Pharmaceuticals has at least one. They have an FDA approved CBD product, but it's like $13,000 a year. Our product's $15, I think, at the moment, at least for in the trial, and it's I don't know if we certainly haven't partnered yet with a pharmaceutical company. But we'll see what's coming.
Yeah.
But we know it works. The research is vast. Cannabis works, especially we're looking at chronic pain. So we know it works, but we need to create trials that speak to Western, especially American physicians.
Yes.
So this trial is IRB approved, right? Which I hear is not easy to do.
Right.
So that's the type of work we're doing is research that will resonate in
But it's also
the
a problem because then the money has to go into actually educating the doctors. The research can be there. That doesn't mean that anybody's really.
So we actually are working with MSLs. Do you know what that stands for? I always see them as MSLs, but the same sort of pharmaceutical reps that you get for another sort of any sort of drug that healthcare professionals would, someone would come into your clinic and buy you guys lunch and sit around and introduce you to their new medicine, and hopefully show you the research and show you how safe it is and how effective it is, and then we're building a brand around that.
Yeah, and I think as people become more aware of this holistic lifestyle, and I mean, we've seen Whole Foods, like everyone's like, now Whole Foods is like this common thing, but before it was like, oh, Whole Foods or organic. But I think as people become more aware, they'll start to, if they're having chronic pain, go down this path of the medical cannabis versus the ibuprofen, not to say
it's
that.
It's really an interesting, sorry to cut you off,
you're fine.
Doctor, but I once heard a veteran say that there's nothing in between Tylenol. There's nothing really helpful in between Tylenol and oxycodone. Like, where's the middle ground in between those for pain that's not totally kept in check by ibuprofen or Tylenol, and yet you don't yet want to go to an opiate for all the. Opiates are terrible at treating chronic pain. It's you're asking.
And the state of Maryland's made it pretty, straightforward with terms of registering online.
Yeah.
You get your ID number. You go to someone, a dentist, or someone that can do the recommendation. And even if you wanted to get the process started, because sometimes it can take a little bit from the Maryland, the board or the state, MMCC to get your actual number. You can see us. We can do the recommendation. Then as soon as you get that number, go straight to the dispensary.
That is a nice thing that you guys do. That's a nice service that you're actually able to see people while they're waiting to get, because yes, ultimately in Maryland's model, and it really varies state by state, but in Maryland's model, the final part of the application process to be able to be approved to use cannabis, medical cannabis, is the doctor.
Yeah.
So a doctor needs to sign off. So you can get the first part of it is getting your MMCC. MMCC stands for the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. And you get your digits, I think it's like 17 digits, or I don't know, it's a long number.
Mix of numbers, letters, and
you apply online,
dashes.
and eventually they send you, upload your picture and a driver's license, and eventually they'll send you a number. And that number then you give to your doctor. And they
I
find
tell
you
people,
online.
check your spam folder.
Yep, it's in there. They're slow, but they're getting faster.
They're getting there.
So I know cannabis, but clearly everyone's talking now also about microdosing other psychotropic drugs.
Yep.
And are you guys having anything going on with that? Like,
we are not yet pursuing those avenues. Although I'm, personally, I think it's really interesting.
So interesting.
So some of the research I've seen on, PTSD is just astounding. I'm
using mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms and MDMA.
Okay.
Actually, I saw some research on MDMA, which was something like the majority of people participating in the study, after their second or third dose, no longer were clinically defined as having PTSD anymore.
That's great.
Like it cured them.
The research on these things are amazing too. Did you read the Michael Pollan book?
I'm in
How
the
to
middle
Change Your Mind?
of listening to it.
Are you doing
yes.
is a new one or How to Change Your Mind?
Oh, it's a new one.
Okay,
it's
I
a
read
new
the
one.
first
I haven't
one.
read How to Change Your Mind, although I think I've heard the TED Talk or something. It's been a while. He's amazing.
He's
Yeah.
amazing. I bought the book. I know the story. I bought that book shortly after it came out, and my father. I actually at the airport in Nashville. My father had just passed away. I was leaving, and it's about all the research going on at Hopkins with terminally ill patients and how they take them all, and they are using LSD to do this experience, and how
Psilocybin.
everyone. Yeah,
I think psilocybin, not LSD. Am I wrong?
Well, I think
anyway,
they do both.
oh.
But yeah. So
call them.
on all the treatments across the board, for every patient it was different. Not always the experience itself wasn't always positive, but at the end, every single person that did it was so happy they had done it, and they all came out with the same thing. They all went into it depressed. These are people that know they're dying, and they don't know if they have a year, they have a month, where their families don't even want to be in the room with them because it's just such loss and helpless. They took people that were hopeless, and they did this experience, and every single one came out with feeling like it's a bigger picture and it's all about love. And I'm gonna cry, but I remember thinking, I wish my father had that, because it wasn't a good experience. And so I think it's crazy and exciting that this could be, we have so many people struggling like your grandfather, you know what I mean, and actually take their spirit and give them a bigger picture look. And I'm excited. I'm sure your family's going to be involved in this stuff.
I hope we are, because if the research continues to bear the results that I've been showing, it's a game changer. It's a game changer for end of life care.
Yeah.
I mean, which is hospice has been a game changer, but largely opiates. So before I came into cannabis, I was working at the JESA, the Jewish Social Service Agency, which is a large social service agency.
We see a lot of those patients. We volunteer to do their dental work.
JESA's great.
Yeah.
And they're
great.
They do a lot of good stuff in the community.
Yeah.
But I did a lot of work as a hospice rabbi, and seeing people who at the end of life just not be able to engage because the opiates to manage the pain are so strong that they're really causing them. It's actually one of the reasons it's the moment that I decided to get into cannabis. I was sitting, my family was already in it, but I was still sticking to my work as in the rabbinate, traditional rabbinate. They haven't kicked me out yet. So, but I was sitting in suburban hospital with an elderly couple in the ICU. The husband was incredibly ill, was in hospice, and was wasting away. And I knew that they lived in DC. And I had never done this before, but at some point I felt so bad that I said to the wife, have you ever considered cannabis? Because he's just not eating, and he's again wasting away, and it was going to kill him. And she looked at me like I just suggested shooting her husband. I mean, it was so, the look she gave me was, it was just so sad that it hurt. It was sad to me that this is how she responded. I mean, that most likely this could have been helpful. And at that same moment, the nurse came in with another bag of morphine and hooked it up. And I watched his eyes flutter, and he just kind of went into oblivion.
Right.
And I realized that it's probably going to be, she's never going to get another moment with him that they get to connect on such a powerful level and be a couple together, because we have to treat his pain when he's suffering.
No,
and
I think
that was the moment where I was like, maybe I could do something to change
amazing.
this, because this is insane. This is silly.
Yeah. No, I think more and more people are coming around to it. I mean, we have someone in our family who has recently started to use medical cannabis, who's older, like late 90s, was always complaining, always just wanting to die, and has started using it, and since using it is out of pain, hasn't talked about death, just overall happy and just moving a little bit more freely and things like that. And everyone's like, oh, it's the steroid shot. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, let's sure. And I go into the kitchen, I look at the bottles to see, I'm like, she's definitely using this. It's great. So
it's a game changer.
So we have a question for you. What's your favorite strain?
What's my favorite strain?
Yeah.
Oh, it depends on what moment, what I'm doing. I mean, strains are so.
If you had to pick one,
Your fan
to be your
favorite.
last, to be your last.
So one of the cool things about Maryland is that we have a testing program here that tests for terpenes. Terpenes, for our listeners who don't know, are the terpenes are found in everything. They're what basically give cannabis its smell and its flavor. But the same terpenes like myrcene is found in tomatoes, or linalool is what gives lavender its smell, or limonene is what gives lime or lemons. And it's just like lavender is relaxing. So too, when you have a cannabis strain that's high in linalool, it's going to be very much a relaxing strain, and a strain that's high in pinene, like pine, or limonene, is going to be elevating and stimulating, and you may feel like talking or going on a hike, versus resting and sleeping on the couch. So I like strains with we have a strain called mac and cheese right now. And it's funny because I hate mac and cheese. I'm like the only person in the world who doesn't like cheese, but I happen to love this mac and cheese, and it's high in this terpenoline, which is also found in Durban poison. Durban poison's another strain. It's not a poison, but it's a landrace strain out of Africa that's just very high in terpenoline and very elevating and stimulating, and it doesn't have probably high in THC-V, which is another form of THC that is an appetite suppressant. So I was talking earlier about dial
nice.
cannabis.
Yeah.
This is the future of cannabis, is that it doesn't have to cause the munchies. You can find, and we test for it in Maryland, and you can go to a dispensary here and look for strains that are high in THC-V.
Are they labeled as appetite suppressants?
No, not yet.
Diet pills.
Mainly because we haven't figured out. We still have to find ways to elevate the amount. It's really typically a small amount. But we discovered it. Not we, but the greater we discovered it. Folks were researching strains in Africa, and where cannabis is largely used as an appetite suppressant for people, during the workday. And so people, would be farmers would be using cannabis to not be hungry during the day, and that's Americans heard that and were like,
we're
what?
using ABV drugs for this, right?
Yeah, I mean this could be a game changer for
Absolutely.
So I happen to like the strain mac and cheese, and it just has the most amazing smell.
Does that have the terpene V in it?
It has some THC-V, and it has the terpenoline, and it has ocimene, which is another just amazing terpene. Really, like, terpenes are the future. So, a lot of people focus on the potency of cannabis, which is largely determined by the THC.
Sure.
I think of THC like the horsepower to a car, and terpenes are like the handling. So you could have two cars that have 300 horsepower. One's a pickup truck, and one's a Porsche. And they're not going to drive the same, and that's because of the terpenes. So you could have two strains that are both 22% THC, but one of them is going to be stimulating and mood boosting.
Yeah.
And the other one could be really sedating, and
Sure.
And so it's just but I really can dial it in based on what my mood is, and what I'm if I have back pain, if what I have to do that day.
That's great.
All those things change what's my favorite strain, but I can never get enough mac and cheese. That smell, I'm ready to turn it into a cologne. My dad likes to joke, for years he used cologne to cover up cannabis, but now they're actually making cannabis colognes. So the world's changing.
Yeah.
Thank God the world is changing.
It's so interesting listening to you talk about this. I feel like we're at a wine tasting. I want to pair this with something. You said it could be like a whole thing.
It's like a sommelier. That's the future. I mean, we it's really amazing. I mean, we have Holistic has this a bunch of different brands, but one of them is Garcia Handpicked, which is a partnership with the Garcia family, with Jerry Garcia's family, and his daughters are amazing, and they are incredibly involved with choosing the strains we use for the brand, and actually go to the farmers and look at what is the soil they use. Is it living soil? Is it different, what type of organic, there's just different ways
a lot
to grow.
that goes into it.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it.
I remember visiting
it's cool.
the Grow Center in PG County when you guys were first opening.
Have you seen it filled?
I saw it was like a quarter filled when I was visiting. It was like right when it opened, and you were showing me the soil and the plants and the seeds and the mother plants and everything. It's amazing. It's very, very cool.
That facility is now doubled. We have more than 70,000 square feet of grow space that's currently lit up.
That's so
cool.
And
producing some incredibly just amazing cannabis strains. And really dialing them in. I mean, it's really fun to see these masters. I don't have a green thumb, but thankfully we hire people who are incredibly talented at this, and it's cool. And incredible chemists who can really concentrate it, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening.
Thank you, Rabbi James.
Thank you.
This was awesome.
My pleasure.
Yeah.